Welcome back to Apple Addiction. The current M1 chip already outperforms the 12-core Mac Pro and Xcode programming. So imagine the M1X. The 16-inch M1X MacBook Pro is going to blow people's minds. It's not only going to cause a massive wave of Windows laptop users to switch to the Mac, but it's going to put the entire computing industry into a panic. There's going to be a gold rush of laptop manufacturers switching to ARM-based chips. So in this video, we are going to tell you about M1X MacBook Pro, the most powerful laptop of all time. The video is going to be amazing, so make sure you stick to the end. Performance. If you factor in optimization and efficiency improvements from the new unified architecture, their performance is going to be absolutely insane. If we take a look at the graphics side, we're expecting the M1X to come packing a 16-core GPU. So, if we double the Geekbench 5 Metal score we got with the M1's 8-core CPU, we end up with around 45,000 points in Metal. That means that the M1X's integrated with graphics is going to outperform the absolute best 5600M graphics in the current 16-inch MacBook Pro. And if you didn't already know, there's currently an $800 upgrade option. But keep in mind that the M1X chip will be coming into the base model 16-inch MacBook Pro. The current M1 chip managed to get a score of 7700 in Cinebench R23. So, let's try to break that score down. The 4 efficiency cores used 1.3 watts of power, which is about 10% of the power of the 4 high-performance cores. So, if we take the simple route of dividing that 7700 scores in Cinebench by 10, we end up with 700 of that score coming from the efficiency cores and 7,000 from the performance cores. So, if we assume that the 16-inch Pro will get 8 performance cores that are not going to throttle because of efficiency and the larger cooling system, we should be getting a total score of 14,700 in Cinebench R23, which basically outperforms the 12-core Mac Pro, and that is just insane. That level of performance in a base 16-inch MacBook Pro is absolutely unheard of, and it's going to happen while using less battery power than before. According to Quo, the 16-inch MacBook Pro 2021 model will include a larger range of ports. This decision has been partly made to reduce the need for dongles, and it will also be the first time since late 2015 that a new MacBook has had anything other than USB-C. LED displays and Face ID. If you are not familiar with Mini LEDs technology, let me explain how it works. For starters, it still uses an LCD model, which is safe from the burn and issues that come with OLED displays. The main difference is that instead of using one huge LED's backlit like on an LCD display, Mini LEDs use hundreds or thousands of small LED backlit that can be locally controlled and completely turned off when displaying black. This leads to excellent contrast colors and a dynamic range similar to an OLED display. This is actually exactly how Apple's Pro Display XDR works. Based on testing done by Light, Science and Applications, Mini LED consumes less power than OLED. And based on testing done by Notebook Check, OLED should generally consume less power than LCD, unless you are constantly viewing over 50% white on your display. So in most cases, the new Mini LED's display will help save battery life on the new 16-inch MacBook Pro, on top of the gains from the larger battery. So realistically, Apple could easily shrink down the battery and make the 16-inch MacBook Pro thinner overall. The only reason it's not called a Mini LCD display is that the LEDs are not small enough to be technically called mini because of the huge 32-inch display size. Now, one of the other benefits of Mini LEDs is that the entire display is actually thinner than an LCD display. Because of that, Apple could easily upgrade the webcam to a 1080p webcam, especially if they're already going to redesign the body, or there is even a chance that Apple could go all out and use the extra space to add Face ID. And believe it or not, 9to5Mac discovered mentions of Face ID in one of the betas of macOS Big Sur. An analyst group, Display Supply Chain Consultants, has issued its own report predicted the demise of the Touch Bar. The report claimed, "We expect Touch Bars to be exceeded by tablets when Apple starts the adoption of the 10.9 inches AM OLED iPad." Further, our sources suggest that Apple may cancel the Touch Bar in the future. Battery. Apple doesn't even need to keep the same 100 watt-hour battery pack because of how little power these new Apple Silicon chips take. The 100 watt-hour battery pack is 71.82% larger than the one in the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro. And based on Linus's YouTuber review, the M1 Pro got over 20 hours of battery life. So even if you factor in the higher resolution and display size of the 16-inch model, the battery life is going to be insane. If Apple keeps the 100-hour battery pack, like potentially 30 hours or more of battery life. The battery pack in the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro is only 16.6% larger than the battery pack in the 13-inch MacBook Air. But somehow, it was able to get an extra 7 hours of battery life in Linus's test. So imagine how much battery life you will get on top of the 13-inch Pro from a 71.82% larger battery in the 16-inch Pro. Redesign. Way back in July, the reliable Apple analyst Ming-Chi Kuo said that the first-star Mac would be a 13.3-inch MacBook Pro shipping before the end of the year without any sort of design changes. And he was right. Within that same investor note, he claimed that 2 redesigned MacBook Pros would be coming in 2021, including both a 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro. Way later in December, he said that these 2 MacBook Pros will have mini LED displays, and they'll have an all-new form factor design. Now the big question is, what do all-new form factors mean in reality? The current 16-inch MacBook Pro only came out in 2019 with thinner bezels. It already came with updated studio quality microphones and a new 6-speaker system. How much more could they change it? Well, Apple could go all out and drastically update the design, potentially changing the display to have rounded corners just like an iPad Pro. And that might actually make sense, since macOS Big Sur now features rounded windows. Or, for example, they could change the MacBook exterior into a flat slab of metal, like the iPad Pro. But that would require the body itself to get thinner, or else it's going to look way too thick. And how could they possibly do that? Well, if you think about it, the switch to an all-in-one Apple Silicon chip means that the logic board no longer needs to be as large. The logic board is hilariously small. The power supply has been completely unchanged, and it's overkill for the M1 chip. The fan is also overkill, because it rarely ever spins up. So in reality, Apple could shrink down all of those components on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, leaving much more room for everything else, including the battery pack. So realistically, Apple could and should completely redesign the form factor to take advantage of the space savings that they can get with the new chips, therefore making the body thinner. Chip. Way back in April, it was reported that Apple will be using a 12-core 5nm ARM chip in a 2021 MacBook. And since the M1 has 8 cores, it totally makes sense that the M1X will be that 12-core chip that they were talking about. Basically, it's going to have the same 4 efficiency cores, but it's going to have double the amount of performance cores. For the most basic tasks, the 16 inches will still be using the 4 efficiency cores to run them, and for watching videos that are actually handled by the hardware video decoders. So battery consumption won't go up at all, and that's how we could potentially see a 30-hour battery life figure. But in terms of performance tasks, we can actually calculate the performance usage based on the M1 chip power consumption. The M1 used a total of 14.3 watts, with 13 watts used by the 4 performance cores and just 1.3 watts used by the efficiency cores. So, if the 16-inch gets a 12 cores M1X chip, we can double the power usage of the 4 performance cores and end up with a total of 27.3 watts under full load. And then, if we compare that number to the power usage of the current Intel i9 16-inch Pro, it's almost 2 times more efficient, which is mind-blowing. Let us know your opinion in the comment section below. This was all for today. Hope you liked the video. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Stay safe, and we will be back soon with another video.